Sarah Chen didn't know that the man sitting behind the chief's desk was the most powerful shifter in North America. She didn't know that he'd been waiting 3 centuries to find his mate, and she certainly didn't know that throwing her badge down in fury would be the moment that changed everything. All she knew was that she'd reached her breaking point. Incompetent, emotional, paranoid. The words her captain had thrown at her that morning still burned in her chest like acid. 6 months of filing complaints about her partner's suspicious behaviour. 6 months of watching evidence disappear from lockup. 6 months of being told she was imagining things when she knew Detective Morrison was dirty. Today had been the final straw. The Hernandez case should have been a slam dunk. Domestic violence, clear evidence, a victim finally ready to testify. Sarah had worked for weeks to build trust with Maria Hernandez, convincing her that this time would be different. This time, they'd protect her. Instead, the evidence had mysteriously vanished overnight. Morrison claimed the chain of custody had been compromised. Internal affairs suggested Sarah had been careless with critical evidence. Maria Hernandez was back in the hospital with 3 broken ribs. Sarah's hands shook as she pushed through the precinct doors, her badge burning a hole in her pocket. She'd joined the force to protect people, to make a difference. Instead, she'd become part of a system that protected the corrupt and failed the innocent. The elevator seemed to take forever. Each floor that passed felt like another weight settling on her shoulders. She'd given everything to this job. Her relationships, her social life, her peace of mind. For what? So men like Morrison could line their pockets while women like Maria suffered? Not anymore. The chief's office door was slightly ajar when she reached the 5th floor. Sarah didn't bother knocking. She was done with pleasantries, done with protocol, done with pretending everything was fine. "Chief Rodriguez, The words died in her throat. The man behind the desk wasn't Chief Rodriguez. He was younger, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair and the kind of presence that filled a room without effort. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, but it was his eyes that stopped her cold. Storm grey, intense, and fixed on her with an attention that made something deep in her chest flutter unexpectedly. "I'm sorry," Sarah stammered, heat creeping up her neck. "I thought, is Chief Rodriguez in?" "He's not." The stranger's voice was deep, controlled, with an edge of authority that suggested he was used to being obeyed. "I'm Marcus Kane, and you are?" "Leaving," Sarah said quickly, backing toward the door. This was not how she'd planned her dramatic resignation. She needed Rodriguez here to witness her fury, to understand exactly why she was walking away. Wait. Something in his tone made her freeze. Not a command exactly, but a request that carried weight. "You look like someone who has something important to say." Sarah turned back slowly. Marcus Kane was studying her with those impossibly grey eyes, and she felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with her emotional state. There was something about him that made her want to trust him, which was ridiculous. She didn't trust anyone anymore. "I don't know who you are," she said carefully, "but this is police business." "So am I." He leaned back in the chair, Rodriguez's chair, like he belonged there. "Federal liaison. I'm here about some irregularities in evidence handling." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Someone else had noticed. Someone with actual authority was paying attention to the corruption she'd been screaming about for months. "Morrison," she whispered. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, sharpened. "Detective Morrison, yes, among others." Sarah felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. Here was someone who might actually listen, someone who might believe her, but she'd been disappointed too many times to hope. "I'm done," she said instead, reaching into her pocket. "I can't do this any more." Her badge felt heavier than it should when she pulled it out. Gold shield, city seal, her name engraved at the bottom, Detective S. Chen. It had meant everything to her once. Now it felt like a symbol of her failure. She stepped forward and dropped it on the desk with a sharp metallic clink that echoed in the quiet office. "That's my resignation," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Effective immediately." Marcus looked down at the badge for a long moment. When he looked back up, his expression was unreadable. Slowly, deliberately, he reached out and slid the badge back toward her. "Denied." The single word hung in the air between them. Sarah stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "Excuse me?" "Your resignation is denied, Detective Chen." He said her name like he'd been waiting to say it, like it meant something to him. "I need officers I can trust, officers who notice when evidence goes missing, officers who fight for victims even when no one listens." "You don't know anything about me." "I know you've filed 17 complaints about Detective Morrison in 6 months. I know you've been investigating discrepancies in evidence lock-up on your own time. I know you convinced Maria Hernandez to testify, and I know you blame yourself for what happened to her." His voice gentled on the last part. "I also know that walking away won't save her or anyone else." Sarah felt something crack open in her chest. Someone had been paying attention. Someone had seen what she was trying to do. "How do you know all that?" "Because I've been watching." Marcus stood, and she realized he was taller than she'd thought, broad-shouldered and solid in a way that made her feel oddly safe. "The corruption in this precinct runs deeper than you know. I need your help to root it out." "My help?" Sarah laughed, but there was no humour in it. "They think I'm crazy, paranoid. No one listens to me." "I'm listening." The words were simple, but they hit her like a revelation. When was the last time someone had said that to her? When was the last time someone had looked at her like she mattered? "I don't understand," she said quietly. "Who are you, really?" Marcus picked up her badge and held it out to her. When she reached for it, his fingers brushed hers, and Sarah felt something impossible, like lightning under her skin, like recognition, like coming home to a place she'd never been. "I'm someone who believes in justice," he said, his grey eyes never leaving hers. "And I'm someone who thinks you're exactly the partner I've been looking for." Partner. The word sent warmth spreading through her chest. Sarah took the badge, her fingers tingling where they touched his. "What would you need me to do?" "Trust me," Marcus said simply, "and let me help you save the people you joined this force to protect." Sarah looked down at the badge in her palm. It felt different now, lighter, full of possibility instead of disappointment. "Okay," she heard herself say, "but I have conditions." Marcus smiled for the first time since she'd burst into the office, and something in her chest pulled tight. That smile was dangerous. It made her want to trust him completely, and that terrified her. "Name them." "No more lies, no more cover-ups. We do this by the book, or we don't do it at all." She met his gaze steadily. "And if you betray me like everyone else has, I'll make sure you regret it." "Deal." Marcus extended his hand. "Partners?" Sarah hesitated for a heartbeat, then reached out and shook his hand. The same lightning feeling raced up her arm, stronger this time, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. What was happening to her? "Partners," she managed, pulling her hand back before she did something embarrassing. Marcus's smile widened, and Sarah had the strangest feeling that she'd just agreed to something much more complicated than a professional partnership, something that would change everything. The days that followed were a strange new rhythm Sarah had never expected. Marcus Kane worked like no federal agent she'd ever encountered. He didn't demand reports or insist on protocol. Instead, he listened. When Sarah showed him her evidence files, the photographs, the timeline discrepancies, the witness statements that had mysteriously disappeared, he studied each piece with the kind of focused intensity that made her feel like her work actually mattered. "You've been thorough," he said on their third morning together, spreading her documentation across the conference room table. "Morrison isn't working alone." "I know." Sarah pointed to a cluster of case files. "Rodriguez has been reassigning investigations away from me whenever they involve Morrison's arrests. And Detective Barnes from Narcotics always seems to show up at crime scenes Morrison calls in." Marcus nodded slowly. Barnes. Yes, he's on my list too. Your list? The corruption runs deeper than one precinct, Sarah. Marcus looked up from the files, those storm-grey eyes serious. This is part of a larger operation. Drugs, weapons, trafficking. Your corrupt cops are small fish in a very big pond. Something cold settled in Sarah's stomach. How big? Big enough that I've been tracking it for 2 years. Big enough that they've killed to protect it. Marcus's voice went quiet, dangerous. Big enough that when they find out we're working together, they'll come for us both. Sarah should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something fierce and determined rise in her chest. Finally, someone who understood the scope of what they were fighting. What do you need me to do? Marcus smiled, and her heart did that fluttering thing again. I need you to be exactly who you are, the honest cop who notices everything and doesn't give up. They started surveillance that night. Marcus had access to equipment Sarah had only dreamed of. Cameras that could see through walls, listening devices smaller than buttons, tracking systems that could monitor a dozen targets simultaneously. But it was Sarah who knew the patterns, who could predict where Morrison would go and when. He always stops at Mickey's diner after his shift, she said, adjusting the camera angle from their position across the street. Orders coffee, sits in the back booth and waits. Waits for what? That's what we're here to find out. 20 minutes later, they had their answer. Rodriguez himself slid into the booth across from Morrison, a manila envelope in his hands. The chief, Sarah breathed. Rodriguez is involved. It gets worse, Marcus said grimly, zooming in with the camera. See the man by the counter, pretending to read his newspaper? Sarah squinted through the diner window. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of stillness that suggested military or police training. But there was something else about him that made her skin crawl. Who is he? Vincent Torres. He runs the trafficking operation for the syndicate. Marcus's voice went hard. And he's not human. The words hung in the air between them. Sarah turned to stare at Marcus, certain she'd misheard. What did you say? Marcus kept his eyes on the camera viewer, but she saw his jaw tighten. Nothing. Forget I said anything. No. Sarah grabbed his arm, and again that impossible electric sensation shot through her. What do you mean he's not human? For a long moment Marcus didn't answer. When he finally looked at her, his expression was unreadable. There are things about this case you're not ready to know. Try me. Something in her tone must have convinced him, because Marcus set down the camera and turned to face her fully. The trafficking operation isn't just moving drugs and weapons, he said carefully. They're moving people, specific people, people with abilities. Abilities. People who can do things others can't, people who are different. Marcus watched her face intently. People who aren't entirely human. Sarah felt her worldview tilting. That's impossible. Is it? You've been a cop for 6 years. Haven't you ever encountered something you couldn't explain? A suspect who was stronger than they should be. A witness who seemed to know things they shouldn't. Evidence that disappeared in ways that defied logic. Sarah's mind raced through years of cases, moments that had nagged at her, details that had never quite added up. The domestic violence case where the perpetrator had thrown a grown man across a room. The missing persons case where the tracking dogs had lost the scent in the middle of an empty field. The drug bust where the suspect had seemed to vanish into shadows. You're talking about supernatural things, she said slowly. I'm talking about a world that exists alongside the one you know. A world where some people are born different, where evolution took more paths than most humans realize. Marcus's voice was gentle, patient. And I'm talking about people who would exploit that difference, who would kidnap and sell those people like livestock. The weight of it crashed over her. Sarah leaned back in the passenger seat, struggling to process what he was telling her. How long have you known? My whole life, Marcus said simply. And you? Sarah turned to look at him, really look at him, the way he moved with predatory grace, the way his eyes seemed to see everything, the way her body responded to his presence like recognition. Are you Different, yes. The admission should have terrified her. Instead, Sarah felt puzzle pieces clicking into place, the impossible authority in his voice, the way other federal agents deferred to him without question, the way he could make her feel safe with just his presence. "What are you?" Marcus hesitated, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. "Someone who has spent a very long time alone," he said finally. Someone who thought he'd never find anyone who could accept both parts of his world. Someone who is asking you to trust him, even though everything he's telling you sounds impossible. Sarah studied his face in the dim light of the car. The vulnerability in his eyes was real. So was the hope he was trying to hide. "This trafficking ring," she said, "they're targeting supernatural people?" "Yes." "And the corruption in my precinct, they're helping?" "Morrison and the others take money to look the other way. They help cover disappearances, alter evidence, eliminate witnesses." Marcus's expression went hard again. "People like Torres use them to clean up loose ends." "And you're here to stop it." "I'm here to burn it all down," Marcus said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made Sarah believe he could do exactly that. "But I can't do it alone. I need someone I can trust, someone who understands justice." Sarah looked back at the diner, where Rodriguez and Morrison were still deep in conversation with the man who apparently wasn't human. Everything she'd believed about the world had just been turned upside down, and somehow Marcus Kane was the only thing that made sense. "If we do this," she said slowly, "if we go after all of them, Torres, Rodriguez, Morrison, whoever else is involved, they'll destroy us. Our careers, our lives, everything." "Yes," Marcus said simply, "and you're asking me to risk it all based on trust." "I'm asking you to help me save people who can't save themselves. I'm asking you to be the cop you became, to protect the innocent." Marcus turned in his seat to face her fully. "And I'm asking you to trust that I will never let anything happen to you." The promise in his voice made something in Sarah's chest pull tight. She should ask more questions, should demand proof of everything he'd told her, should probably run as fast and far as she could. Instead, she found herself nodding. "Okay, but I have conditions." Marcus's mouth curved into a small smile. "You always do. What are they?" "You don't lie to me, not ever. If I'm risking everything for this, I deserve the whole truth." Sarah met his eyes steadily. "And if you're going to trust me with your secrets, then you trust me with all of them." "Deal," Marcus said immediately. "Good. Now tell me how we're going to take these bastards down." Marcus's smile widened, and Sarah felt that dangerous warmth spread through her chest again. Whatever she'd gotten herself into, there was no going back now, and for the first time in months she wasn't afraid. She was ready to fight. 3 nights later, everything went wrong. Sarah had started to believe they were making progress. The evidence was mounting. Financial records showing unexplained deposits, surveillance footage of the trafficking meetings, witness statements from victims who'd escaped the syndicate. Marcus worked with methodical precision, building an airtight case that would bring down not just Morrison and Rodriguez, but the entire network. She'd also started to believe that the impossible electric feeling between them wasn't entirely one-sided. The way Marcus looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. The way his hand would linger when he passed her coffee. The way he said her name like it meant something precious. But tonight, walking into the abandoned warehouse where their latest tip had led them, Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. "This feels wrong," she whispered, her hand instinctively moving to her weapon. Marcus had gone still beside her, and in the dim light filtering through broken windows, his expression looked almost predatory, alert, dangerous. "We should leave," he said quietly, "now." But before they could move, the lights blazed on, flooding the warehouse with harsh fluorescent brightness. Sarah squinted against the glare, her heart hammering as figures emerged from the shadows around them. Morrison stepped forward, his face twisted with satisfaction. Rodriguez was beside him, along with Barnes and 3 other cops Sarah recognized from the precinct. But it was the man behind them who made her blood go cold. Vincent Torres smiled like a shark scenting blood. "Detective Chen," he said, his voice carrying an odd accent she couldn't place. "And the mysterious federal agent. We've been so looking forward to meeting you both." Sarah's hand moved toward her gun, but Morrison was faster. The click of safeties being released echoed through the warehouse as 6 weapons pointed at them. "I wouldn't," Torres said pleasantly. "We have so much to discuss." "What do you want?" Marcus's voice had changed, dropping to a register that made something primitive in Sarah's brain want to submit. Or run. "Information! You've been very busy these past few weeks, gathering evidence, building cases." Torres began to circle them slowly, like a predator sizing up prey. "But you've made a crucial mistake." "And what's that?" Sarah found her voice, forcing herself to sound calmer than she felt. "You assumed you were hunting us." Torres stopped in front of her, and she caught a scent that made her skin crawl, something wild and wrong. "When really we've been hunting you." The attack happened faster than Sarah could process. Torres moved with inhuman speed, faster than anyone had a right to move, lunging toward Marcus with hands that seemed to stretch and sharpen mid-motion. But Marcus was already moving, catching Torres mid-leap with strength that shouldn't have been possible. And then Sarah's world exploded into chaos. The sound that came from Marcus's throat wasn't human. It was a growl that seemed to vibrate through her bones, primal and commanding and utterly impossible. Torres snarled back, and Sarah saw his face changing, lengthening, teeth becoming fangs. Morrison raised his gun, shouting something Sarah couldn't hear over the roar in her ears. She moved on instinct, tackling him sideways as the shot went wild. They hit the concrete hard, rolling, fighting for the weapon. Behind her, the sounds of violence were unlike anything she'd ever heard. Growls and snarls, the crash of bodies hitting walls, the crunch of what might have been bones breaking. Sarah managed to get Morrison's gun, rolling away as Barnes tried to grab her from behind. She spun, weapon raised, and froze. Where Marcus had been standing, there was now a wolf, not a man, not human. A massive silver-grey wolf with eyes the colour of storms, locked in vicious combat with something that had once been Torres, but now looked like a nightmare crossed between man and beast. Sarah's mind simply stopped processing. Everything she thought she knew about reality shattered like glass. The wolf, Marcus, moved with lethal grace, powerful jaws snapping at Torres's throat. But Torres was larger, more savage, and when his claws raked across Marcus's ribs, Sarah saw blood mat the silver fur. "No!" The word tore from her throat without permission. She raised her gun and fired. The bullet took Torres in the shoulder, spinning him away from Marcus. The creature that had been the trafficking lord howled in rage and pain, yellow eyes fixing on Sarah with murderous intent. "You stupid human!" Torres snarled, his voice distorted by his changed features. "You have no idea what you're interfering with." He lunged toward her, claws extended, and Sarah knew she was about to die. The wolf that was Marcus intercepted him mid-leap. The impact sent both creatures crashing into a stack of shipping containers. Sarah heard Torres scream, a sound no human throat should make, and then there was sudden, terrible silence. Marcus padded toward her, massive paws silent on the concrete. Blood dripped from wounds along his flanks, and Sarah found herself backing away, her gun still raised but trembling in her hands. "Stay back," she whispered, even though every instinct she had was screaming that she was safe with him, that she'd always been safe with him. "Just stay back." The wolf stopped, those familiar grey eyes meeting hers, and Sarah saw something that made her heart crack open. Hurt, not physical pain, emotional devastation, like she'd just rejected everything he was. The air around Marcus shimmered, and then he was human again. kneeling naked on the warehouse floor, blood streaming from claw marks across his chest. His clothes lay in shreds around him, and when he looked up at her, his expression was carefully blank. "Sarah, what are you?" The words came out raw, desperate. "What the hell are you?" Marcus slowly got to his feet, making no move to cover himself or come closer. "I'm a shifter, a werewolf if you want to use the old terms, and I'm the—" He stopped, shook his head. "It doesn't matter what else I am." "Doesn't matter?" Sarah's voice cracked. "You lied to me. You made me think I was crazy for thinking something was different about you. You made me trust you, and you've been lying this whole time." "I never lied to you." Marcus's voice was quiet, defeated. "I told you I was different. I told you there were supernatural people being trafficked. I told you I'd spent my life alone." "You didn't tell me you could turn into a wolf!" Sarah was shouting now, her gun still trained on him, even though she knew she'd never use it. "You didn't tell me you were one of them." "Would you have stayed if I had?" Marcus asked simply. "Would you have trusted me? Would you have worked with me to save innocent people if you'd known what I was?" The question hit her like a physical blow because she knew the answer. A week ago she would have run. She would have thought he was insane or dangerous or both. But now she'd seen him risk his life to protect her. She'd seen him fight a monster to keep her safe. She'd worked beside him for weeks and felt safer than she ever had with another person. And she'd felt that impossible connection between them, that electric recognition that made no sense but felt more real than anything in her life. "I need to think," she said, lowering her gun with shaking hands. "I can't. I need time to process this." Marcus nodded, grabbing a torn piece of his shirt to hold against his bleeding chest. "Torres is dead. The others ran when they saw him shift. We have maybe 10 minutes before this place is swarming with backup." Sarah looked around the warehouse, seeing it clearly for the first time. Torres's body lay crumpled against the shipping containers, his features slowly returning to human as death claimed him. The corrupt cops' weapons lay scattered across the floor where they dropped them in terror. "What happens now?" "Now you go home," Marcus said, pulling on his ruined jacket. "You forget this happened. You go back to your life and pretend none of this was real." "And you?" "I clean up the mess. I make sure no one comes looking for you. I disappear." Marcus met her eyes one last time. "I keep you safe, even if it means staying away from you." Something in Sarah's chest clenched painfully. "Marcus." "Go, Sarah." His voice was gentle but final. "Before they come back with reinforcements, before you get hurt because of what I am." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she wasn't afraid of him, that supernatural or not, he was still the man who'd believed in her when no one else would, who'd listened to her concerns and trusted her judgment and made her feel like she mattered. But her world had been turned upside down, and she couldn't think clearly with the scent of blood and violence thick in the air. So she ran. Sarah ran through the empty streets, her mind reeling with images of silver fur and storm-grey eyes. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs gave out, until she found herself sitting on a park bench 6 miles from the warehouse, staring at her hands. Hands that had touched his. Hands that had felt that impossible electric connection she now realized was something supernatural, something real. Marcus Kane was a werewolf. The man she'd started to trust, started to care for, started to fall for. He wasn't human, and she'd left him bleeding in a warehouse, surrounded by the bodies of enemies he'd killed to protect her. Sarah buried her face in her hands and tried to figure out how to live with what she'd learned, how to live with what she'd lost. 3 days of silence stretched between Sarah and the truth she couldn't escape. She'd called in sick to work, unable to face the precinct where Morrison and Rodriguez might return, where everything would remind her of Marcus Kane and the impossible things she'd witnessed. Instead, she sat in her apartment, staring at her badge and trying to convince herself it had all been a hallucination. But her hands still tingled where she'd touched him. Her body still remembered the electric recognition that had flared between them from the first moment. And every time she closed her eyes, she saw storm-grey wolf eyes looking at her with devastating hurt. On the third night, her sister Lily showed up with Chinese takeout and determination. "Okay," Lily said, settling cross-legged on Sarah's couch with practiced ease. "You've been radio silent for 3 days, which means either you're dead or you're spiralling. Since you answered the door, I'm going with spiralling. Talk." Sarah picked at her lo mein without appetite. "I can't." "Try me. I've heard everything from drug busts gone wrong to serial killers who collect toenails. What could be worse than that?" "Werewolves," Sarah said quietly. Lily paused with a dumpling halfway to her mouth. "Okay, that's new." "I'm serious." "I know you are. That's what worries me." Lily set down her chopsticks and turned to face Sarah fully. Start from the beginning. So, Sarah told her. Everything. Marcus Kane and the corruption investigation, the surveillance and the growing trust, the warehouse and the impossible transformation she'd witnessed. She told Lily about the way Marcus had fought to protect her, and the way she'd pointed a gun at him afterward, and the way he'd looked when she'd backed away from him. When she finished, Lily was quiet for a long moment. "Do you trust him?" Lily asked finally. "What?" "Marcus. Do you trust him? Not the werewolf part, just him, the man." Sarah thought about Marcus listening to her evidence files like they mattered, about him believing her when no one else would, about the way he'd said her name like it was precious, and the way he'd promised to protect her even if it meant staying away. "Yes," she whispered, "I trust him completely." "Then what are you afraid of?" The question hit Sarah like a revelation. What was she afraid of? Not Marcus himself. She'd known he was dangerous from the moment she met him, and it had only made her feel safer. Not the supernatural world. She'd spent her career dealing with things that didn't make sense. "I'm afraid of being wrong again," Sarah said slowly. "I'm afraid of trusting someone who's been lying to me." "But you just said he never actually lied." "He didn't tell me the whole truth." "Sarah." Lily leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Did you tell him everything about yourself on day one? About Dad leaving? About why you became a cop? About your nightmares from the Hendricks case?" "That's different." "Is it? Or did you both share what you could when you could, building trust gradually?" Lily reached over and took Sarah's hands. "The man you described, the one who listened to you and believed you and risked his life to protect you, is that not real because he can turn into a wolf?" Before Sarah could answer, her phone rang. The display showed an unknown number, but something made her answer it anyway. "Sarah?" Marcus's voice was rough, urgent. "Where are you?" "At home. Why, they have your sister." The words hit her like ice water. Sarah looked at Lily, who was still sitting on the couch, staring at her with confusion. "No, she's right here. Not Lily, your other sister. Emma." Sarah's blood went cold. Emma, her baby sister who lived across town, who worked nights at the hospital, who had no idea about any of this supernatural insanity. "How do you know about Emma?" "Because Rodriguez called 10 minutes ago. They want you to turn yourself in, alone, or they kill her." Marcus's voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the fury underneath. "Sarah, they're using her as bait." "Where?" "The old police station, the one they condemned last year." Marcus paused. "You can't go. It's a trap." "She's my sister." "I know. That's why I'm asking you to trust me one more time." His voice gentled. "Let me help you save her." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of choice settling on her shoulders. She could try to handle this alone, the way she'd handled everything else in her life. Or she could trust the man who'd already proven he'd die before he let anyone hurt her. "What do you need me to do?" "Meet me at the warehouse where Torres died. And Sarah?" Marcus's voice dropped to that impossibly gentle tone that made her chest ache. "Come armed, but be ready to trust me completely." "I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly, "for trusting me." The line went dead. Sarah stared at her phone, then looked at Lily, who was watching her with wide eyes. Emma's in trouble, Sarah said, already moving toward her bedroom to get her gun. I have to go. With the werewolf? With Marcus? Lily was quiet as Sarah checked her weapon, strapped on her vest and grabbed her badge. When Sarah headed for the door, Lily caught her arm. Sarah, if you're wrong about him, then I'm wrong, but if I'm right, and I don't try to save Emma because I'm scared of the truth, I'll never forgive myself. Sarah hugged her sister tightly. I love you. If something happens... Nothing's going to happen, Lily said fiercely, because you're going to trust the right person for once in your life. The warehouse looked different at night, shadowed and ominous under the pale moon, but when Sarah saw Marcus waiting for her, something in her chest settled. He looked human again, dressed in black tactical gear that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean strength. But she could see the wolf in the way he moved now, predatory and alert, could see it in his eyes when he turned toward her. How is Emma? Sarah asked without preamble. Alive, scared, but unharmed. Rodriguez is using her to draw you out, but he's not the real threat. Marcus's expression was grim. There are 3 more shifters with them, rogues working for the trafficking ring. Rogues? Shifters without pack bonds, without the restraint that comes from belonging somewhere. Marcus met her eyes. They're dangerous in ways Torres never was. Sarah felt fear try to claw at her throat, but she pushed it down. What's the plan? I go in first, you wait for my signal, then come in the back entrance. Marcus pulled out a small device that looked like a high-tech earpiece. This will let us communicate. When I tell you to run, you run. When I tell you to hide, you hide. No arguments. And Emma? I get her out first. That's my priority, keeping you both safe. Something in his voice made Sarah step closer. Marcus, what aren't you telling me? For a moment he didn't answer. When he did, his voice was so quiet she almost missed it. The pack bonds don't just connect shifters to each other, they connect us to our mates. Marcus looked at her with those storm-grey eyes. What you felt between us, that electric connection, it's real. It's the mate bond recognizing its other half. Sarah's breath caught. You're saying I'm saying you're everything. My mate, my other half, the person I've been waiting centuries to find. Marcus's voice was raw with honesty. And I'm saying that if something happens to you tonight, those rogues will learn what happens when someone threatens an alpha's mate. The word hit her like revelation. Alpha. You're not just any shifter, Sarah said slowly. You're their leader. I'm the Alpha King. I rule all the packs in North America. Marcus smiled ruefully. That federal liaison story wasn't entirely false. Supernatural law enforcement is part of my responsibilities. Sarah stared at him, processing the magnitude of what he'd just revealed. Not just a werewolf. Not just any werewolf, the king of all werewolves, and she was supposedly his destined mate. This is insane, she whispered. Yes, Marcus agreed. Will you trust me anyway? Sarah looked into his eyes and saw the same man who'd listened to her complaints and believed in her evidence. The same man who'd fought monsters to protect her. The same man who was asking her to trust him with her life and her sister's life. The same man who made her feel like she belonged somewhere for the first time in her life. Yes, she said, I trust you. Marcus's smile was devastating. Then let's go save your sister. The old police station loomed against the night sky like a monument to corruption. As they approached, Sarah could see movement in the windows, Rodriguez and his remaining corrupt cops, along with shapes that moved too fluidly to be entirely human. Remember, Marcus murmured into the comm, I go first. Wait for my signal. Sarah watched him disappear into the shadows, moving with inhuman silence. For several minutes nothing happened. Then she heard Marcus's voice in her ear, quiet and controlled. They're all on the second floor. Emma's in the old interview room. 3 humans, 3 shifters. A pause. Sarah, when this starts, it's going to be violent. Don't hesitate and don't look back. I'm ready. I know you are. On my mark. The sound that echoed from the building wasn't human. It was the roar of an alpha claiming his territory, protecting his pack. Sarah heard shouts, screams, the crash of furniture being destroyed. "Now!" Marcus's voice commanded. Sarah ran. She burst through the back entrance, weapon raised, following the sounds of chaos to the second floor. The hallway was a disaster zone. Broken furniture, claw marks in the walls, the smell of blood and fear. She found Emma in the interview room, handcuffed to a chair, but alive and unharmed. As Sarah worked to free her, she could hear the battle raging in the main room, growls and snarls and the sounds of predators fighting for dominance. "Sarah?" Emma's voice was shaky but strong. "What's happening? Who are those people?" "Friends," Sarah said firmly, getting the cuffs off. "We're getting out of here." They made it halfway to the exit before Rodriguez stepped into their path. The corrupt police chief looked like he'd been through hell, his uniform torn, his face bloody, his eyes wild with desperate fury. But he still had his gun, and it was pointed straight at Emma. "Not so fast, Chen!" Rodriguez's voice was ragged. "You cost me everything. My career, my pension, my partners. The least you can do is watch your sister die for it." "Let her go," Sarah said, raising her own weapon. "Your fight is with me." "No!" Rodriguez snarled. "My fight is with the supernatural freaks you're protecting, starting with your sister." He pulled the trigger. Sarah moved without thought, throwing herself between the bullet and Emma. Pain exploded through her shoulder, spinning her around, but she stayed on her feet. And then Marcus was there. He moved faster than physics should allow, covering the distance between them in a heartbeat. Rodriguez had time for one terrified scream before Marcus was on him, and then there was only silence. Sarah sagged against the wall, her shoulder on fire, watching Marcus kneel beside Rodriguez's still form. When he looked up at her, his eyes were wolf-bright and furious. "You're hurt." "I'm fine. Emma is safe." Marcus moved to her side, his hands gentle as they examined her wound. "The bullet went through. You'll heal." "Good." Sarah looked at him, this impossible man who'd just saved her sister's life. "Is it over?" "It's over," Marcus confirmed. "The rogues are dead. The corruption ring is finished." Sarah nodded, then looked at Emma, who was staring at Marcus with wide eyes. "Emma, this is Marcus Kane," Sarah said calmly. "He's special." "Special how?" Emma asked faintly. Sarah looked at Marcus, saw him waiting for her answer with patient hope in his storm-grey eyes, saw the man who trusted her with impossible truths and asked for her trust in return. "He's the man I love," Sarah said simply, "and he's going to be part of our family now." Marcus's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "If you'll have me," he said quietly. Sarah reached out with her uninjured hand and touched his face, marvelling at the way he leaned into her touch like he'd been waiting for it his whole life. "Always," she whispered. "I choose you. I choose this. I choose us." When Marcus kissed her, there in the wreckage of their old lives, Sarah felt the last of her walls come down, felt the mate bond snap into place like coming home. She'd tried to resign once, best decision she'd never made. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of impossible becoming possible. Sarah's shoulder healed with supernatural speed, a side effect of the mate bond, Marcus explained with that gentle smile that still made her heart flutter. The corruption investigation became front-page news as federal prosecutors dismantled the trafficking ring piece by piece, and Sarah found herself living in a world she'd never imagined existed. Marcus's home was nothing like she'd expected. Instead of some Gothic castle or underground lair, it was a sprawling ranch house nestled in the mountains outside the city, surrounded by enough land to let a pack of wolves run free. It felt like sanctuary. "This is beautiful," Sarah said on her first morning there, standing on the back deck with coffee warming her hands. Below them, the valley stretched green and peaceful in the early sunlight. "It's home," Marcus said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Our home, if you want it to be." Sarah leaned back against his solid warmth, marvelling at how safe she felt. How right this felt, despite everything that should make it terrifying. "Tell me about pack life," she said. "What am I supposed to know?" Marcus chuckled, his breath warm against her ear. "Be yourself, that's all you need to know." "That's not helpful?" "It's true." Marcus turned her in his arms, his grey eyes serious. "The pack doesn't need you to be something you're not, Sarah. They need you to be exactly who you are, the woman who fights for justice, who protects the innocent, who never gives up on what's right." Over the following days, Sarah began to understand what he meant. The pack members who came and went from the house were nothing like the savage creatures she'd imagined. There was Elena, Marcus's second-in-command, who ran a legal aid clinic in the city. David, who taught elementary school and made the best pancakes Sarah had ever tasted. Maria, who was a trauma surgeon and had 3 adopted human children. They were people. Complex, caring people who happened to be able to turn into wolves. "It's not what I expected," Sarah admitted to Elena one evening as they worked together in the kitchen, preparing dinner for the pack gathering. "What did you expect?" Elena asked, her dark eyes amused. "I don't know. More hierarchy, dominance displays, bowing and scraping?" Elena laughed. "Marcus isn't that kind of alpha. He leads through respect, not fear. We follow him because we trust him, because he's proven himself worthy of our loyalty." "How long have you known him?" 60 years, Elena said casually, then smiled at Sarah's startled expression. "Shifters live longer than humans. Marcus is actually closer to 400 years old." The number should have been shocking, but somehow it just explained the depth Sarah saw in his eyes, the patience that seemed infinite. "Does that bother you?" Elena asked gently. "Should it? That depends. Can you handle being with someone who's lived that long? Who's seen that much? Who will want to share centuries with you if you'll let him?" Sarah thought about it as she chopped vegetables, considering the weight of forever. With anyone else, the idea would have been overwhelming, but with Marcus. "I can't imagine being without him," she said simply. Eleanor's smile was warm. "Then you'll be fine. The mate bond doesn't just connect souls, Sarah. It equalizes lifespans. You'll have all the time you need." That night, Marcus took her to her first pack meeting. The gathering was held in a large barn on the property, transformed for the evening with warm lights and comfortable seating. About 30 people attended, men and women of all ages, some with children, all looking at Sarah with curious but friendly eyes. "Pack," Marcus said, his voice carrying easily through the space. "I want you to meet Sarah Chen officially, my mate, and your future alpha." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Applause, cheers, people rising to their feet in welcome. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as the acceptance washed over her. "I don't know much about being an alpha," she said when the noise died down, "but I know about justice. I know about protecting people who can't protect themselves, and I know about fighting for what's right, even when it's hard." An older man near the back raised his hand. "What about the human world? How do we balance our nature with their laws?" Sarah looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. "We work within both systems," Sarah said. "We use human law enforcement to protect supernatural victims, and we use pack justice to handle threats that human courts can't touch. We build bridges instead of walls." The discussion that followed was lively and engaged, covering everything from territorial disputes to educational opportunities for pack children. Sarah found herself drawing on her police experience, offering practical solutions to complex problems. "You're a natural," Marcus murmured in her ear as the meeting wound down. "I'm terrified," Sarah admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you humble. Humility makes you a better leader." Later that night, alone in Marcus's bedroom that was slowly becoming their bedroom, Sarah stood at the window looking out at the moonlit valley. "Second thoughts?" Marcus asked, coming up behind her. "Third and fourth thoughts," Sarah said honestly. "This is a big responsibility. Leading a pack, bridging 2 worlds, being your partner in all of this." Marcus's arms came around her, solid and reassuring. You don't have to be perfect, Sarah. You just have to be present. The pack doesn't need you to have all the answers. They need you to care about finding them. Sarah turned in his arms, studying his face in the moonlight. What if I'm not enough? What if I can't live up to what they need? Then we figure it out together. Marcus cupped her face gently. That's what partners do. That's what mates do. The word still sent warmth spiralling through her chest. Mate. Not just lover or girlfriend or even wife. Something deeper, more permanent, more real than any human relationship she'd ever known. Show me, she whispered. Marcus's eyes flared silver in the darkness. Show you what? The bond, what it really means, what we really are together. For a moment Marcus hesitated. Sarah, if we complete the mate bond, if we claim each other fully, there's no going back. You'll be tied to me for life, to the pack, to this world. Are you sure? Sarah thought about her old life. The loneliness, the frustration, the feeling that she never quite fit anywhere. Then she thought about the past few weeks, the sense of purpose, the feeling of being valued, the way Marcus looked at her like she was everything he'd ever wanted. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Marcus's smile was radiant. Then let me show you what forever feels like. The claiming was unlike anything Sarah could have imagined. When Marcus shifted, letting her see his wolf form in the intimate setting of their bedroom, she felt no fear. Only wonder at the magnificent creature her mate became. When he marked her, a gentle bite at the curve of her neck that sent fire racing through her veins, she felt the mate bond snap into place like coming home. The connection between them blazed to life, deeper than thought, stronger than words. She could feel what he felt, the centuries of loneliness that had shaped him, the fierce protectiveness that drove him, the overwhelming love that consumed him when he looked at her. And underneath it all, the unshakable certainty that she was his other half, the missing piece that made him whole. Mine, Marcus whispered against her skin, human again, holding her close as the bonding settled into her bones. Ours, Sarah corrected, and felt his joy echo through the connection between them. They spent the rest of the night learning the new language of their joined souls, exploring the depths of a connection that would last lifetimes. When dawn broke over the valley, Sarah felt fundamentally changed, not just Marcus's mate, but the alpha female of a pack that was becoming her family. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "How's married life treating you?" Sarah smiled, typing back, "Getting there, soon." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Soon?" "Well," Sarah said, settling back into his arms, "I figure we should probably make it official in human terms too. What do you think about a wedding?" Marcus's answering smile could have powered the entire city. "I think," he said, pressing a kiss to her mate Mark, "that I can't wait to call you my wife." Sarah laughed, giddy with happiness and possibility. 6 weeks ago she tried to quit her job. Now she had a new career, a new family, and a new understanding of what home really meant. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked softly. Sarah thought about it seriously. The danger, the responsibility, the complete upheaval of everything she thought she knew about the world. "Ah, only one," she said finally. Marcus tensed slightly. "What's that?" "I regret waiting so long to trust you completely." Sarah turned to meet his eyes, letting him see the absolute certainty in her expression. "I should have known from the first moment I met you that you were exactly what I'd been waiting for my whole life." Marcus's kiss tasted like forever, and Sarah knew she was finally, truly home. 6 months later, Sarah Chen Kane stood before the assembled pack wearing a crown of mountain laurel and moonstone, officially accepting the role she'd been growing into since that first day she'd thrown her badge down in Marcus's office. "By moon and mountain, by blood and bond, I accept the responsibility of Alpha," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the ceremonial clearing, "to protect the pack, to serve justice and to stand beside my mate as equal partner in all things." The pack's howl of acceptance echoed through the valley, a sound that still sent chills down Sarah's spine. But now it was the chill of belonging, of being exactly where she was meant to be. Marcus stepped forward, his own ceremonial crown, silver and sapphires that matched his eyes, catching the firelight. When he took her hands, Sarah felt the mate bond hum with satisfaction between them. "Alpha Sarah," he said formally, then smiled with the warmth that was just for her. "My queen." The celebration that followed lasted until dawn, filled with pack traditions Sarah was still learning, but embraced wholeheartedly. Elena's children wove flowers in her hair. David presented her with a handmade badge that read Alpha Detective, her new official title in the supernatural crimes division she'd helped establish. Maria led the pack in songs that were older than the country itself. As the sun rose over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Sarah found herself standing on the deck of their home, with Marcus beside her, watching their family celebrate below. "No regrets?" Marcus asked, echoing the question he'd asked so many times over the past months. "None," Sarah said, and meant it completely. "Well, maybe one." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I wish we'd met sooner," she said, leaning into his warmth. "We could have saved each other a lot of lonely years." "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "Or maybe we met exactly when we were supposed to, when you were ready to trust someone completely, and when I was ready to share my world with someone worthy of it." Sarah considered this, thinking about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, angry, isolated, burning out from fighting a system that seemed designed to defeat her. That woman wouldn't have been ready for any of this. She'd needed to reach her breaking point, needed to be desperate enough to throw caution aside and trust a stranger with storm-grey eyes. "You might be right," she conceded. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the pack members begin to disperse to their homes, scattered throughout the territory. Some shifted to wolf form for the run home, others piled into cars with sleepy children. All of them part of the extended family Sarah was still getting used to having. "I have something for you," Marcus said suddenly. He disappeared into the house and returned with a small wrapped box. Sarah opened it to find her old police badge, the one she'd thrown down in resignation, now mounted in a silver frame alongside a photograph of their wedding day 3 months earlier. "You kept it," she said softly. "Best decision you never made," Marcus said with a grin. Sarah laughed, remembering her own words from that night in the old police station. "You know, when I stormed into that office, I thought my life was ending. I thought I was giving up on everything I'd ever wanted. And now? Now I know I was just making room for something better." Sarah looked at the badge, then at the photo of them kissing under an arch of white roses, while the pack cheered around them. "I wasn't resigning from my purpose, I was upgrading it." A distant cry from inside the house made them both turn. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her still flat stomach, where their first cub was growing, due to arrive in spring. "That's Emma," Sarah said. "She's probably looking for her favourite aunt." Emma had moved into the guest house 2 months earlier, officially to help with pack administration, but really because she'd fallen hard for David and his quiet strength. The transition from human to pack life had been easier for her than it had been for Sarah. Emma had always been the adaptable one. "Go," Marcus said, kissing Sarah's forehead. "I'll clean up here." Sarah found Emma in the kitchen, attempting to make coffee with one hand while bouncing a fussing 6-month-old on her hip. The baby belonged to one of the younger pack couples who trusted Emma with babysitting duties for the ceremony. "Having trouble?" Sarah asked, taking little Anna and settling her expertly against her shoulder. "I don't know how you make it look so easy," Emma said, finishing with the coffee maker. "You're going to be amazing with your own." Sarah rubbed Anna's back, feeling the baby settle into sleep. It still amazed her how natural this felt. The caregiving, the nurturing, the fierce protectiveness that had awakened the moment she'd learned she was pregnant. "I had good practice," Sarah said. Taking care of you taught me most of what I needed to know about protecting the people you love." Emma smiled, pouring coffee for both of them. "David says pack children are even easier because they're surrounded by so many adults who love them, built-in extended family." "David's right." Sarah shifted Anna to get more comfortable. "This baby's going to have dozens of aunts and uncles, plus grandparents who've been waiting centuries to spoil someone." "Speaking of which, Marcus's parents called yesterday. They want to know if you've chosen names yet." Sarah grinned. Marcus's parents, the former Alpha King and Queen, had been sceptical about their son choosing a human mate at first. But after meeting Sarah and seeing how she'd transformed both Marcus and the pack's approach to justice, they'd become her fiercest champions. "We're thinking Alexander for a boy," Sarah said, "after Marcus's grandfather, and Luna for a girl." "Luna Kane," Emma mused. "I like it. Very regal." "Very werewolf princess," Sarah corrected with a laugh. They sat in comfortable silence, sipping coffee and watching the sunrise paint the kitchen in warm gold. Anna slept peacefully in Sarah's arms, and Sarah felt that bone-deep contentment that had become her new normal. "Do you miss it?" Emma asked suddenly. "Your old life, the precinct, the cases, the adrenaline of being a city cop?" Sarah considered the question seriously. She'd left the city police force officially 2 months ago, though she still consulted on supernatural crimes cases through her new position. Her days now were filled with pack business, training new supernatural law enforcement officers and building bridges between the human and shifter communities. "I miss parts of it," Sarah said honestly. "I miss the direct impact of individual cases, the feeling of getting justice for specific victims, but what I'm doing now—" She gestured toward the window, where the last of the pack members were visible, heading home through the morning light. "I'm protecting hundreds of people instead of dozens. I'm preventing crimes instead of just solving them after the fact." "And Marcus?" Sarah's smile was automatic. "Marcus makes everything else irrelevant. I could be doing anything anywhere, and as long as he was beside me, it would feel like home." The sound of footsteps on the porch announced Marcus's return. He appeared in the doorway, still wearing his ceremonial clothes, but with his sleeves rolled up and his hair mussed from helping with clean-up. "How's our honorary pack member doing?" he asked, nodding toward Anna. "Perfect angel," Sarah said, standing carefully to hand the baby back to Emma, "just like her parents said she'd be." Marcus wrapped his arms around Sarah from behind, his hands settling protectively over her stomach. The gesture had become automatic for him since they'd learned about the pregnancy. His wolf instincts demanded constant reassurance that his mate and cub were safe. "Elena wants to know if you're up for a training session this afternoon," he said. 3 new recruits for the Supernatural Crimes Unit." "Human or shifter?" Sarah asked, already mentally preparing for the lesson. "2 human, 1 young wolf who wants to follow in his alpha's footsteps." Marcus's voice carried fond pride. "They specifically requested you as their instructor." Sarah felt the familiar flutter of satisfaction that came from being needed, from knowing her experience could help others navigate the complex intersection of human and supernatural law. "I'll be there," she said. "What time?" 2 o'clock. That gives us time for lunch and a nap." Marcus's hands tightened slightly on her waist. "Doctor's orders. You're growing our cub and running a pack. You need rest." "Yes, Alpha," Sarah said with mock solemnity, then laughed when Marcus growled playfully against her neck. Emma made gagging sounds. "You 2 are disgusting. Take it somewhere private." "Good idea," Marcus said, scooping Sarah up into his arms with supernatural ease. "See you later, Emma." Sarah waved goodbye over Marcus's shoulder as he carried her toward their bedroom, Anna's giggles following them down the hall. Their bedroom had changed since that first night when they'd completed the mate bond. Sarah's police commendations hung on the wall next to Marcus's pack honours. Her detective novels shared shelf space with his historical texts. The bed was covered with a quilt made by pack members as a wedding gift, embroidered with symbols representing both their human and supernatural families. Marcus set her down gently, then cupped her face in his hands. "Happy?" he asked softly. Sarah looked around the room that represented everything they built together, the blending of two worlds, two lives, two hearts that had found their perfect match. "Impossibly happy," she said, standing on her toes to kiss him. "I love you, Alpha King Marcus Kane." "And I love you, Alpha Queen Sarah Kane." Marcus deepened the kiss, and Sarah felt the mate bond sing between them, as strong and certain as ever. "My partner, my mate, my everything." As they settled together for their afternoon nap, Sarah's hand drifted to her stomach, where their future was growing. In a few months there would be a cub to add to their perfect life. In a few years there might be more. She thought about the badge in its silver frame downstairs, symbol of the life she'd tried to leave behind. But she hadn't really left it behind. She'd expanded it. Instead of protecting one city, she was helping protect two entire worlds. Instead of working alone, she had a partner who would stand beside her through anything. Instead of wondering where she belonged, she was home. Sarah Chen had walked into that office 6 months ago, ready to resign from everything. Instead, she'd found her destiny, and she'd never been happier to be wrong about what she wanted. Before we continue with more stories like this one, please take 2 seconds to like this video and let me know where you're listening from in the comments below. I love hearing from you, and it helps me know what kinds of stories you want to hear more of. If you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free and it helps more people discover these stories. Thank you for letting me share Sarah and Marcus's journey with you. Until next time, may you find the courage to trust when love finds you, even when it comes in forms you never expected.